Hey guys, it's Alex, and today I'm here with a book review for Winter Garden by Kristin. I buddy read this from Angie from Literary Labors, who will be linked down below. This is an adult historical fiction novel about a family. Meredith and Nina are two sisters who've grown up their whole lives with a cold Russian mother. After their father's death, they decide they need to get to know their mother better, and she starts telling them the story of her life, taking them back to Russia in the 40s. I really loved this book. I gave it 4 stars. I was hesitant going in because I hadn't enjoyed The Great Alone, also by Kristin, and I was worried this was going to be more of the same, but this wasn't. This was so beautiful. This made me understand all the praise for The Great Alone. Like everything people say about that book, I felt here. This was so wonderful. I'm hoping that one was just a fluke because if all of her books are like this, I'm going to have a wonderful time going through all of Hannah's works. And to start with, I was entirely absorbed by Anya's story. Anya is the girl's mother. She was born in Russia. She lived in Leningrad. And this is, in many ways, the story of her life. She starts it off as a fairy tale. She's telling a fairy tale about a peasant girl who falls in love with a prince. And then it slowly turns into her actual life. The names change. They stop being fairy tale-like. They get more and more detailed as you figure out that this is actually her life. She's telling her life story for the first time ever. And it was absolutely beautiful. I was so engrossed. I didn't want to put it down. I wanted to figure out what would happen next and who she was because she's telling the story, but you don't know who she is in the story. You don't know her relation to the characters. And it was just beautiful. Like, it was so heartbreaking. This is a really hard book to read. I definitely teared up. It was just one of those emotional, touching stories that completely absorbed me. I also loved the characters of Nina and Meredith. I loved their stories as well. Most of this book was focused on the family dynamic, the mother-daughter relationship, and Anya's history. But you also get Nina and Meredith. Nina is a photographer who mostly focuses on Africa, war-torn places. And her story and why she's like that and why she's constantly moving around and kind of living a nomadic lifestyle. And then you have Meredith, who is in many ways the opposite. She's never left home. She married her childhood sweetheart and she's dealing with kind of that relationship falling apart. And both of their stories were really wonderful, especially towards the beginning. At the beginning, it was about them and less about Anya. And then as the story went on, it kind of swapped. And I enjoyed that. I think there's a lot of contemporary in this book as well as historical fiction because it is set during the present day in the early 2000s as well as their history in the 70s and their mother's history in the 30s and 40s in Russia. And it was wonderful. I think what really stands out in this book is Hannah's storytelling. Her writing is fine. I didn't fall in love with it quite as much as some other people have, but for me, it just kind of, it didn't get in the way of the story. I didn't really think about it too much. It was just kind of like there and very passable and very functional, and that was it, which is fine. Like, if the writing doesn't get in the way of the story, and I never think about the writing, that's kind of a compliment in itself. It's not distracting. It's not detracting from the story in any way. It's just very out of the way. The storytelling in this, however, that was wonderful. I couldn't wait to get answers and closure for this family. I wanted the answers and the closure. I was so interested in where it was going and intrigued, and I could have read another 500 pages of this book. Like, I didn't want to put it down. I just flew through this. I was so absorbed. Like, I read ahead of Angie, which was really bad, and I feel bad for it, but I just couldn't stop at a point. I just wanted to finish this book and figure out what happened and get the full story of Anya's life because this book was, about mothers and daughters, and it was about Anya, and it was about all the tragedy in her life and all the heartbreak she went through, and how through it all, she's still alive. She still survived it all. It's wonderful. This had me sobbing by the end, and even then I didn't want to put it down. It absolutely broke my heart in the best way possible. Now, after saying all these positive things, I did only give this book 4 stars. For most of the book, I was considering giving it the full 5, but I was not a fan of the ending. I didn't like the ending at all. For me, the ending kind of cheapened the rest of the book. I didn't hate it. It was still a satisfying ending. It just felt like it was significantly weaker than everything else. Like, Hannah was taking this complex story with all these different characters, and instead of giving them a complex ending, she just wrapped it all up with a neat little bow and like packaged it to the reader. and I wasn't a fan of that. I do like books that have happy endings, and I like it when things work out, but at a point, some books don't need happy endings. Some books work better when not everyone gets the happy ending. Some people can, some people might not, but it works better if it's not entirely happy and not entirely packaged in this picture perfect way. And this book felt like a very messy, complicated story with so much tragedy and heartbreak, and then a neat little happy ending with a bow, and they all lived happily ever after. And it kind of rubbed me the wrong way. It did end this book on kind of a meh note for me. For how much I loved the rest of the story, it was disappointing that the ending just really didn't offer anything. The only other two small negative things I have to say, they're both fairly small critiques. I'm not a big fan of the story within a story trope. I do find it kind of frustrating and annoying, and the two stories kind of distract from each other for me. I think Hannah did it very well, but, at the end of the day, that's never going to be a storytelling technique that I really enjoy. And much like in The Great Alone, I still felt like there was kind of a pacing problem, where much of the story was very, very slow, but then there was character development and growth and major things that happened that felt like they happened very quickly when there was so much time taken for things that didn't matter quite as much. I don't think the pacing problem was as bad here as it was in The Great Alone. In The Great Alone, it bothered me a lot. I don't know that in this book I would have noticed it so much if I hadn't already read The Great Alone, but it was still apparent. For example, their mother starts opening up to them and starts telling them her story. And it really doesn't make sense how fast she does it, because they are pressuring her to do it and their father has asked her to do it. But, it's been 40 years that she hasn't told them her story. It's been 40 years that their father has wanted her to tell them their story. It's been 40 years since the two girls have been begging their mother to get to know her. And then after all that, it's like she starts doing it very quickly, and it didn't make sense like how fast she decided to tell them her story. And there were a number of things like that where it just felt like things happened too quickly for how slow this book was in general. And again, it wasn't a major problem in this book. I don't think I would have been able to put my finger on what exactly I felt was wrong with the pacing had I not read The Great Alone first, where that pacing was much, much more apparent. But overall, I love this. If you enjoy historical fiction, I highly, highly recommend this book. And I'm incredibly looking forward to picking up more Kristin Hannah. I have one more on my shelf, True Colors, which I will hopefully get to pretty soon because I adored this. And if the rest of her works are anything like this, I'm so excited to have found a new favorite author. And hopefully The Great Alone was just a fluke. Let me know down below if you've read Winter Garden and what you thought of it if you have. And as always, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see y'all again soon.